Rising Strong by BrenA Brown. Have you ever felt the sting of being completely misunderstood? Picture this. You're swimming in a beautiful, cool lake with someone you love more than anyone in the world. It's been 25 years since you've done this together, and the moment feels absolutely perfect. Overwhelmed with gratitude, you decide to be vulnerable. You open your heart and say, "I'm so glad we're doing this together. It's beautiful out here." You wait for that warm, loving response you know is coming. But instead, you get a half smile and a quiet, "Yeah, water's good," and then he just swims away. The warmth of the moment turns to ice. Your mind starts racing. What just happened? Did I say something wrong? Is he mad at me? That feeling, that sudden, gut-wrenching drop, when connection is met with silence, is a fall. And it's a fall we've all experienced. That's a true story from the life of Dr. BrenA Brown, a research professor who has spent over 2 decades studying the very things that make us human: courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. After her groundbreaking books, The Gifts of Imperfection and Daring greatly inspired millions to be brave and show up in their lives, she realized there was a missing piece to the puzzle. She had called people into the arena to dare greatly, but she hadn't given them a map for what to do when they inevitably fall flat on their faces. Because if you're brave enough, often enough, you will fall. Her book, Rising Strong, is that map. It's not about pretending we don't get hurt. It's not about avoiding failure. It's a guide to what it takes to get back up. So here is my promise to you. By the end of our time together, you'll understand the 3-step process that the most resilient people in the world use to turn their greatest struggles into their greatest strengths. You'll learn how to recognize when you're hooked by emotion, how to get honest about the stories you tell yourself when you're in pain, and how to write a new, braver ending for your life. This isn't just about surviving a fall. It's about learning how to rise stronger, wiser, and more whole than you were before. Let's begin. To understand how to rise, we first have to accept a fundamental law of emotional physics. It's a truth as reliable as gravity. If we are brave enough, often enough, we will fall. Courage is not about winning or losing. It's about showing up and being seen when you can't control the outcome. And when you live that way, getting your butt kicked is not a possibility. It's a guarantee. Think about it. If you risk loving with your whole heart, you're going to experience heartbreak. If you try to create something new and innovative, you're going to fail. If you care enough to engage with the world, you're going to be disappointed. The question isn't if you will fall, but how you will get back up. For most of us, the process of getting back up is messy, painful, and often done in the dark. We don't talk about it. We prefer our stories of recovery to be quick and clean, a 30-second montage where the hero dusts himself off and gets back in the fight. But BrenA Brown's research uncovered that the real magic, the real transformation, happens in the messy middle. It happens in the dark. And the people who learn to navigate that darkness have something in common. They follow a 3-step process. She calls it the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. Let's start with the reckoning. This is the moment you realize you're on the ground. It's the moment you acknowledge that you're feeling something. A button has been pushed. You're hooked. Your emotions are off kilter. You don't have to know what you're feeling, just that you are feeling. It sounds simple, but it's the step most of us skip. Instead of saying, "Wow, that comment really hurt," we either pretend we're fine, or we immediately lash out. Instead of acknowledging our pain, we inflict pain on others. Instead of feeling disappointed, we choose to live disappointed. The reckoning has 2 parts. First, recognize the emotion. Your stomach is in knots. Your thoughts are racing. You want to punch a wall or eat a whole pint of ice cream. Your body often knows you're in an emotional moment before your mind does. The goal isn't to have it all figured out. It's just to say, I'm feeling something right now, and I need to pay attention. The second part of the reckoning is to get curious. Instead of shutting down, you open up, you ask questions. Why am I so angry right now? What's really going on underneath this feeling? I can't stop thinking about that conversation. Why? Curiosity, Brown says, is an act of vulnerability and courage. It requires us to surrender to uncertainty. Instead of needing to be right, we choose to want to learn. But our instincts often work against us. When we're hurt, our brains are hardwired to protect us, to run, to fight, or to freeze. We don't like discomfort, so we find ways to offload our hurt. One of the most common ways is something Brown calls chandeliering. We push our pain down so deep we think it's gone. But then a seemingly small, innocent comment from someone hits that tender spot, and we explode. We go from 0 to 10 in a split second, jumping so high with rage or tears that we hit the chandelier. It's especially common in situations where there's a power difference, a boss with an employee, a parent with a child. We hold it together in front of people we want to impress, but the second we're with someone who can't fight back, we let it all out. This creates what she calls eggshell environments, where everyone is walking on eggshells, afraid of setting someone off. Another way we offload hurt is by bouncing it. Our ego, that part of us that needs to be right and look good, can't handle the vulnerability of being hurt. So its bouncers anger, blame, and avoidance spring into action. It's much easier to say he's an idiot than it is to say what he did made me feel insignificant. It's easier to pretend we don't care than to admit we're in pain. And of course, there's numbing. We use food, alcohol, work, shopping, the internet, anything to take the edge off the sharp points of our emotions. But, as Brown famously says, you cannot selectively numb emotion. When we numb the dark feelings like grief and fear, we also numb the light. We numb our capacity for joy, love, and connection. The opposite of all this offloading is the reckoning. It's the brave choice to turn toward our story, to get curious about our pain, and to say a hearty yes to the emotional adventure that has just begun. Because the moment you fall, your hero's journey starts, whether you're ready for it or not. This brings us back to that lake in Texas. When Brene's husband Steve shut down her bid for connection, her first instinct was to go into self-protection mode. On the long swim back across the cove, her mind started writing a story, a very specific kind of story. She calls it the shitty first draft, or SFD for short. Anne Lamott, a writer she admires, calls this the child's draft, where you let it all pour out, knowing no one is going to see it. Brene's SFD went something like this. He's blowing me off. He must have looked at me swimming and thought, man, she's getting old. She sure doesn't rock a Speedo like she did 25 years ago. He's a jerk, and I'm going to make him pay for it later when he least expects it. This is the second and most critical phase of the process, the rumble. The rumble is where we own our story by getting brutally honest about the first version we're telling ourselves, the SFD. The minute we fall, our brain goes to work trying to make sense of what happened. But here's the problem. Our brains are wired for story, not for truth. In the absence of data, we will always make up a story. It's a survival mechanism. Neurologically, our brain rewards us with a little hit of dopamine for creating a coherent narrative, for connecting the dots. The catch is, the story doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to feel certain. What we call a story based on limited data and a lot of fear-based imagination is really just a conspiracy theory we confabulate. We create lies, honestly told, to protect ourselves. And the most dangerous stories we make up are the ones that diminish our own worth. Stories about being unlovable. Stories that tell us we're not good enough. Stories that say we don't belong. The rumble is the process of challenging that first story. It's the willingness to ask 3 questions. 1. What more do I need to learn and understand about the situation? 2. What more do I need to learn and understand about the other people in the story? 3. And the hardest one, what more do I need to learn and understand about myself? This is where Brene's story on the lake becomes a masterclass in the rumble. Instead of acting out on her SFD when they got to the dock, she did something revolutionary. She was exhausted and hurt, but she asked him, "Can you get back in the water?" She didn't accuse, she didn't attack. She chose curiosity, she shared her story. "I feel like you're blowing me off," she said, "and the story that I'm making up is..." And she told him her fear about him thinking she was old and unattractive. This phrase, "the story I'm making up," is the key that unlocks the rumble. It's not an accusation, it's an invitation. It allows you to own your feelings without attacking the other person. Steve's first reaction was defensiveness. But then, after a long, difficult moment of treading water, he told her the truth. He wasn't looking at her and judging her. He was barely aware of her at all. He was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. The night before, he'd had a terrifying nightmare about all their young children being on a raft in the middle of that very cove, and a speedboat coming right at them. He was so consumed by fear that all he could do on the swim was count his strokes to keep himself from losing it. Do you see what happened? Her story was about her worthiness. His story was about his fear and his role as a protector. Neither was true, but both were real. The space between her SFD and the truth of what was actually happening is what Brown calls the delta. The delta is where all the learning is. It's where wisdom lives. By rumbling with their stories, they found their way back to each other. They discovered a key learning about their relationship. When shame and fear show up, everything can unravel unless they are willing to be vulnerable in the exact moment they most want to self-protect. This process of rumbling with our stories forces us to confront some of the most difficult topics in our lives, things like boundaries, integrity, generosity, failure, accountability, trust, and forgiveness. Let's talk about boundaries. Brown tells a hilarious and painful story about being guilt-tripped into a speaking event where she had to share a hotel room. Her roommate was a character. She put her dirty boots on the couch, smoked on the patio of their non-smoking room, and, in a moment of pure horror for Brene, wiped her frosting-covered hands all over the couch cushions, shrugging and saying, "It's not our couch." Brene was filled with what she calls self-righteousness. Her SFD was that the world is divided into 2 types of people: good, rule-following people like her, and sewer rats and scofflaws like her roommate. This rage led her to a session with her therapist, Diana, who asked her a question that would change the course of her life. Do you think it's possible that your roommate was doing the best she could that weekend? Brene was incensed. Of course not. People are lazy, people don't try. But this question obsessed her. She started asking everyone she knew, do you believe, in general, that people are doing the best they can? What she discovered was profound. The people who answered no were almost always judging others as harshly as they judged themselves. They were often perfectionists who knew they weren't always doing their best, so they assumed no one else was either. But the people who answered yes, the people she identified as wholehearted, weren't naive, They just lived from a different assumption. Her husband Steve put it perfectly. I don't know if people are doing their best. All I know is that my life is better when I assume that they are. It keeps me out of judgment and lets me focus on what is, and not what should or could be. This led Brown to one of the book's most powerful frameworks, Living BIG. It stands for boundaries, integrity, and generosity. The idea is this: I will make the most generous assumption possible about your intentions and your behavior, and I will set and hold firm boundaries about what is and is not okay. Generosity without boundaries is not generosity. It's a recipe for resentment, and boundaries without generosity are just walls. But together, they are revolutionary. It means you can be compassionate and hold people accountable. You can say, I know you're struggling, and I care about you, but it's not okay for you to speak to me that way. Living BIG is choosing what is right over what is fun, fast, or easy. It's practicing your values, not just professing them. This brings us to failure. Brown shares the story of a man named Andrew, a respected leader at an ad agency. His team was pitching a huge, high-profile client. Andrew had a bad feeling from the start. He knew the client had a reputation for being difficult, but the team was so excited that he pushed his doubts down and said, "We can do this." After months of grueling work, the team flew out to present their pitch. The clients were disrespectful, typing on their laptops and barely paying attention. Andrew's team was crushed. His face-down moment was watching his people, who had poured their hearts into the work, be dismissed and disrespected. His SFD was short and brutal. I am a screw-up. I am a failure. Notice the language. Not I screwed up, but I am a screw-up. That, Brown teaches, is the voice of shame. Guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. Shame focuses on self. Guilt focuses on behavior. Guilt is productive. It helps us make amends. Shame is destructive. It tells us we are unworthy of connection. Andrew's first instinct was to find someone to blame, but he recognized he was under the rock of shame and couldn't make good decisions from there. He called a friend, shared his story, and heard the empathy he needed to get back on his feet. He realized the difference between being a failure and having made a mistake. He then went to his team and did something incredibly brave. He said, I screwed up, I made a mistake, and I apologize. I hope I can regain your trust. That act of accountability changed everything. The team, united, voted to walk away from the toxic client. That day, they worked together, they fell together, and they rose together. And it transformed their culture. The delta for Andrew was the space between I am a screw-up and I screwed up. It's a small change in words, but it represents a monumental shift in perspective. It's the difference between self-loathing and self-compassion. This process of owning our failures and integrating the lessons is what Brown calls composting failure. It's taking the mess, the screw-ups, the things that feel dead and gone, and turning them into fertile ground for new growth. Failure can become nourishment if we're willing to get curious and rumble with the story. But what about the falls that feel deeper than failure? What about heartbreak? Brown tells the story of Claudia, a young woman whose family life is dominated by her sister Amy's struggle with alcoholism and depression. The holidays are always hard. When Amy shows up, there's tension. When she doesn't, there's a cloud of grief. No one talks about it. One Thanksgiving, Claudia goes to meet her sister, hoping for a simple, normal dinner. But she finds Amy living in a squalid, trash-filled room in an abandoned building. She's sicker than ever. Claudia is overwhelmed with grief and guilt. Her face-down moment, her reckoning, doesn't happen in that room. It happens later, on a train home, when a violent fistfight breaks out between two men. In that moment of chaos, she realizes she can't run from conflict. It will just follow her. She has to turn toward her story. Her SFD is full of resentment. Why can't I just have a normal family? Why is it always so hard? And it's full of fear. If I try to help her, I'll get sucked in, and it will destroy my life. If I don't help her, I'm a bad sister. Claudia's rumble is with expectations, disappointment, heartbreak, and grief. She has to let go of the fantasy of a normal family and accept the reality of her own. She has to learn that she can love her sister and still set boundaries to protect her own life and marriage. This is where Brown makes a crucial distinction. Heartbreak isn't just a big disappointment. Heartbreak is what happens when love is lost. It can be the loss of a person, or the loss of a relationship, or the loss of who someone used to be to addiction or illness. And where there is heartbreak, there is grief. Grief, Brown explains, is perhaps the emotion we fear the most. We try to pathologize it, to get over it, but we can't rise strong when we're on the run from our grief. The rumble requires us to feel it. Grief involves three things: loss, longing, and feeling lost. We have to be willing to sit in that discomfort. And often, on the other side of grief, is forgiveness. For forgiveness to happen, Brown learned, something has to die. You have to grieve the loss of a dream, an expectation, or the relationship you thought you had. You have to let go of the hope that the past could have been any different. Forgiveness is not about condoning what happened. It's about taking back your life from the story of hurt, so you are no longer chained to the person who wronged you. The broken-hearted, Brown concludes, are the bravest among us. They are the ones who dared to love. This journey through the reckoning and the rumble brings us, finally, to the revolution. The revolution isn't a single event. It's what happens when this process becomes a practice, a new way of being in the world. It's when emotion washes over you, and your first thought isn't to run or blame, but to get curious. What's the story I'm making up right now? The revolution is about integration. It's about making ourselves whole. Brown tells a deeply personal story about her own identity. For years, she was ashamed of being a fifth-generation Texan. She wanted to be a sophisticated New York intellectual, not someone who says y'all and grew up shooting skeet. She was trying to disown a part of herself. Her rumble was with her own history, her own identity. It was about calling back home all the parts of herself she had abandoned. She realized she couldn't be all in if only parts of her showed up. To live a wholehearted life, we have to integrate all of our experiences, the falls, the struggles, the parts of us we're not proud of. As Walt Whitman wrote, "I am large. I contain multitudes." The revolution is when we stop being characters in our stories, not villains, not victims, not even heroes. We become the authors. We recognize that when we deny our stories, they define us. But when we own our stories, we get to write a brave new ending. This practice transforms not just our personal lives, but our families and our workplaces. Imagine a team at work where, instead of gossip and back-channeling, someone could say, "We need a rumble on that email from the boss. The story we're making up is that our project is being canceled." Imagine a family where a teenager could say, "The story I'm making up is that you don't trust me." Opening the door for a real conversation instead of a shouting match. This is the revolution. It's a grassroots movement that starts with each of us finding the courage to own our stories of struggle. It's fueled by the freedom that comes when we stop pretending everything is okay when it isn't. We craft love from heartbreak, compassion from shame, grace from disappointment, and courage from failure. We are the brave and broken-hearted, and we are rising strong. So what do we take away from all this? If there's one lesson that sits at the very heart of rising strong, it's this. The most courageous act in the world is not avoiding the fall. It's learning how to get back up. And getting back up isn't a matter of willpower or toughness. It's a skill. It's a process. It's a practice. For so many of us, especially when we're young, we believe that strength means never showing that you're hurt. It means pretending you're invincible. But what BrenA Brown shows us, through years of research and powerful, honest storytelling, is that true strength lies in the exact opposite. It lies in the courage to acknowledge our pain, to get curious about it, and to share our story with someone who has earned the right to hear it. The single most practical and life-changing tool from this book is the concept of the SFD, the story I'm making up. It's a game changer because it gives us a language for our emotions that isn't an attack. Think about the last argument you had with a friend, a parent, or a partner. How much of it was about what actually happened, and how much of it was about the stories you were each telling yourselves about what the other person's actions meant? "You're not listening to me" becomes, "The story I'm making up is that what I'm saying isn't important to you." "You're always late" becomes, "When you're late, the story I tell myself is that you don't respect my time." It changes everything. It turns a battle into an exploration. This book matters today more than ever because we live in a culture that is terrified of discomfort. We are experts at numbing, blaming, and pretending. We curate our lives on social media to show only the highlight reel, and we wonder why we feel so alone in our struggles. Rising Strong is a powerful antidote to that. It's a call to be real. It's permission to be imperfect. It reminds us that our wholeness, our very wholeheartedness, depends on integrating all of our experiences, especially the falls. So how can you start putting this into practice right now, today? Here are 3 simple actions. First, try the 1-inch square. On a tiny piece of paper, write down the names of the people whose opinions truly matter to you. The people who will be there to pick you up when you fall, not to judge you for it. Keep it in your wallet or on your desk. When you face criticism, look at that list. If the person criticizing you isn't on it, their feedback doesn't get a front row seat. Second, practice naming your SFD. The next time you feel that flash of anger, hurt, or shame, just pause. You don't have to do anything about it. Just ask yourself, what's the story I'm making up right now? Simply noticing that first fear-driven narrative is a revolutionary act. It creates a tiny bit of space between your feelings and your reaction. In that space lies your freedom to choose a different response. Third, embrace the idea of living big. Make the most generous assumption you can about someone else's behavior, while also being clear about your own boundaries. Assume that the person who cut you off in traffic is rushing to the hospital, not that they're a jerk. And also know that it's okay to say no to things that drain you, and yes to what you need. It's the beautiful balance of compassion and self-respect. That was a summary of Rising Strong by BrenA Brown. We've walked through the core ideas today, but a summary is like looking at a map of a beautiful country. It shows you the layout, the major cities, the rivers, but it can't give you the feeling of the sun on your skin, the smell of the local food, or the sound of the music in the streets. The real magic of this book is in the stories, in the way BreNA's honesty and vulnerability make you feel seen. If anything we've talked about has struck a chord with you, I truly encourage you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional journey that can genuinely change how you navigate the inevitable falls in your own life. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It lets me know that these journeys are helpful for you, and it ensures you won't miss our next deep dive into another life-changing book. Let's keep rising strong together.